This concerns our trip to Lakewood. We stopped on a place called Ridge Avenue, where it used to be a meadow, and the meadow was there when I was there. It was 1921, so that makes it 60 years ago. There was still a meadow there. And a party by the name of Sininsky was a butcher. He had a son who was a big, heavyset guy, and his name was Ruby Sininsky. So all the houses to me looked so small when I was there this time as compared to our houses here. The house, for instance, a two-story house, it would have two front windows, and the house itself would be about 20 feet wide at the most. And it was a two-story job with a porch. At any rate, we drove on. We had made the left turn on this street, and I stopped the car, and I got Kathy and Patty to get out of the car to just look down at the meadow. And I told them, this is where, when I was very young, about 8 years old, I used to play. And then we drove on, and we came to a house near a corner where we used to live. And the thing I most remember about this house is that we had chickens. And my mother, she didn't want to bother too much with the chickens, feeding them and watering them. So she decided she's going to take them and cook them. So she sends me to take them over to Tarshish, the shochet, and the shochet is a religious man who slaughters the animals. He has to have a special knife for the whole thing. So I go and I start running after the little chickens. They must have been about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks old. And I start chasing after them, and I managed to grab, I remember I had 2 handfuls. And it was close to the time that my father, who used to commute from Lakewood to New York, was due to come back on the train. So just as I'm getting into the gate to get out of to get to the sidewalk, here's my father. And he says, Edwin, what do you do with those chickens? So I said, well, Mama told me to take them over to Tarshish to kill them. He says, put them back. Those are things I remember so well. And this house was separated from the corner by about an acre of land. And the house, and in this part of this so-called garden, they had a big long row of raspberry bushes. And the raspberries would come out, and they were lots of fun to pick and eat. And then we kept on. Then we continued with our automobile. Now we made a right turn. Tarshish's house was still there, and you have to remember this was back in 1920. And the lot that separated Tarshish's house from Mrs. Myers was about a half an acre. And then there was her house, a place that I had first stayed in when I went to Lakewood. I was about 8 years old at the time I went to Lakewood. But all in all, the trip was really something I really enjoyed. Well, after we finished our trip on Ridge Avenue, we circled around and we came up to Clifton Avenue, which was a street that I wanted to go and stop and look at. And it was very much changed from what it had been. So I asked my nephew, Alan, if he would drive me over on Clifton Avenue to where Gelbstein's Bakery was. And there, of all places, is Gelbstein's Bakery, still open, still operating, and busy. And we got out of the car, and I went in, and there are two ladies waiting on the customers. And they had all kinds of pastries and cakes and bread and Kaiser rolls and everything that I dearly liked. And Alan, seeing all this, he decided he needed to have some of everything. So he got a bag full of rolls and rye bread, and he was eating some of the rye. Well, we were hungry. We hadn't eaten when we began the trip. So anyway, I asked the lady when it was our turn to come up there to pick out stuff, asked her where the Gelbstein boys were, and she said, well, they sold out, but they live here. So I got from her their address and their telephone, and I called them up. And the first thing I said was, this is Ed London, and I'm a voice from out of the past. And he says, Eddie, come over here, I want to see you. So we, after making purchases of the cakes and the bread and everything, we drove over to where they live. And they live in very nice, comfortable houses. And Ben Gelbstein just couldn't get over the fact that here I am. And he said one thing for me that is somewhat somber. He says, there's not too many of us are left around here of our age group. And he mentioned Lou Eisner, the guy who died with a rheumatic fever. You remember me telling you about him? That's what he brings up. He remembered everything. And then we visited with his brother, who was slightly older than him, and we went over the facts. It turned out that my father sold his father the building that they were in, that we bought the bread. And at the time, nobody had any money, and my father wanted Mr. Gelbstein, who happened to have come from the same town in Poland as my father.
Golly.
And so that's what makes the relationship pretty strong.
Yeah.
So Manny Gelbstein is the other brother. Reminded me that my father told his father to give him a check for $500 because my father was the broker in the deal. And Mr. Gelbstein says, Sam, I don't have any money in the bank. So my father says, never mind that. Give me the check. I'll take it over there. Nobody gives good checks anyway today. So he says, we wrote out the check, and my father brought it over and got the contract signed, and the check came back. He says, but somehow or other we managed to scrape around and we made the check good. So those are the things that happened so many years ago. And the town, it really, the downtown part has not grown. It seems like that Lakewood has grown on the outskirts. They're surrounded by a lot of small strip shopping centers. And it's full of trees. It is really a delightful place. It's a bad place if you have to make a living there. But it's a great place if you just wanted to buy a house and you had income from elsewhere to be able to live there. But
you moved there when you were 8, and then...
I moved there. I was born in 1911, and we moved there in 1920. I was 8, going on 9. That's how old I was. There was a schoolhouse on 7th Street. That's all still there. A great many of the buildings are still there. Now let me tell you about the pictures of the house. That house, we were living on a place called Park Avenue, which faced the railroad track. We owned that house. So Pop had an opportunity to sell it, and he wanted to move away from the railroad tracks. It was very close to Lakewood High School, but he didn't want to be over there. So he had a friend all of whom were easy to meet. Jewish people living in the town were easy to get acquainted and to meet each other. There was a man there who was a former jeweler. And I remember him for several things. One is he had a farmhouse on County Line Road. And he lived there. It was a nice two-story yellow house. Lived there with his wife. And he had 2 children. At any rate, he owned some lots on Forest Avenue. And my father negotiated with him, and he bought a lot to build a house. And he got a man who had built the previous house for us, a Mr. Thompson, to build our house. I don't know how he managed it financially, but he borrowed $6,000 from Mr. Moskowitz, the retired jeweler, who incidentally never slept at night. He'd sleep all day and was awake all night. Those are the things I remember so well. And Mr. Moskowitz loaned him the money to finance the house. And the deal was that it was a $7,000 mortgage payable in 3 years. Now, my father didn't know if he could pay it, but he was an optimist of the first order, and he just decided he was going to do it and said he's going to do it and make it work. So the house that you see in the picture is essentially the house that was built. It had 7 bedrooms, a living room, a dining room, the kitchen, and 2 bathrooms, which was a real modern type house. And incidentally, who do you think made the plans for the house? Uncle Leon. And the house is still there, sturdy. One of the remarkable things was that when we were there this time, I just couldn't get over. There's the house. There's our house. And there are 2 trees in the front yard. Well, those were maple trees, and we had ordered them by mail from some kind of a seed house, and they sent them COD, and we didn't have the money to take them out, so they died in the post office. Well, finally, we decided we better go take them out, and we got them, and we planted them, and they were all dead. And so we planted them, and nothing happened. The next year, out from the bottom of one of these plants that came a little branch. Now, this wasn't on the top of the tree, but all the way down by the bottom. Those trees, this was 1923, those trees now are about 18 to 20 inches thick, or 24 inches thick, and they're very stubby sort of trees. They grew up, but the trunk is not round, you know, it was kind of lumpy. And the concrete porch was still there, and I told Kathy, now that's where I broke my arm jumping over the chairs. It's just, and then we walked on the side of the house. There's a nice driveway where the people parked for the apartment house next door. And we walked down, and I said, now there's the garage that Papa and I built. We actually built that ourselves. It was built out of wood with the 2x4s or 2x6s for the, you know, for the walls. And then we had shingle rib all around, which is a 1x2 stripping. And then it's all shingled. It's still shingled. And the same doors are still on there. And we used to park the car and put all the junk back there. And there it is. Apparently nobody particularly drives a car because they got their whole yard fenced. And altogether it was rather a memorable trip. Well, after we got through with the Gelbsteins, they recommended a restaurant to us, and we went over there, and I wanted to show Kathy and Alan the lakes. There are two lakes there. One is called Lake Carousel, Joe, and it sounds like it's a combination of girls' names, and the other one is Lake Minetta. And they're just beautiful lakes. They're about 2.5 miles long and about 2/3 of a mile wide. And they run right up to this road called River Avenue. And this restaurant that we went to, Peterson's, is located right by the railroad tracks. There's a railroad track crossing. The Jersey Central crosses there. And after we parked the car, we went into the restaurant. And they served real good food. It was very highly recommended to us by the Gelbsteins. And the food was delicious. And then when we got out of the restaurant, the car was parked close to a lower section of the land. Walked over there, and there's a stream running down, a real active stream, not like you see around here, all real clear water coming from the lakes. The overflow of the lakes is ran past this parking lot. You couldn't see it from the parking lot. You had to walk over there to see it. Altogether, I pointed out to Alan, I said, this is really a very pretty place. I can understand how my father felt wanting to get away from New York City after having lost my brother and coming from a place that's all bricks and stone and rock and no greenery. He just was taken with it. And I went with him. He had never seen Lakewood before. I went with him on that Saturday on the train.
But you and Rachel were close in age, and then Herbert and
Rachel
Leon.
and I am 6 years older than Rachel. She's 62. No, I'm not. Yeah, that's about it. She was about 60. I'm getting the years mixed up.
And what about Uncle Herbert? I never.
Uncle Herbert was the oldest, and he didn't stay in Lakewood very long. He went to New York, and he was engaged in being a bricklayer, and then he was a contractor, a brick contractor. He built some of the roadway contracting for the brickwork on some of the roadways in New York City, and did a number of apartment houses. That was his field.
And then Leon went on to college.
And Leon went on to college, and no, he did not. At that time, you just graduated from high school, and you went right to law school.
Huh.
They weren't required 4 years. So when he was 22 years old, he was an attorney. He was telling us the night before last that he went, my Uncle Ben, the rich uncle, introduced him to the Title Guarantee and Trust Company, and they put him on as a title searcher. And then in about 4 weeks, they gave him a big promotion. And he worked for them for about 2 years, searching titles and writing up title guarantees. And then he decided to go on his own, so he had his own practice, and he rented an office, and he took off. Now, it took his whole lifetime to get to this period of wealth. But just like I told you, I would think he's worth a good $10-12 million. That's how life is. You work at it, and you keep on with it, and he's a somebody. We've always been that way.
And so, what did you graduated from high school, and then you went on to college, though, didn't you?
I went on to college. I went to Fordham. I had a tough time to get in anywhere, and then I didn't have enough money to pay the tuition because it was 1930. And the Depression started with the fall of the stock market in 1929. And things just got real bad quick. Not like we got now, but real bad quickly. And I used to commute at first. I commuted from New York to Lakewood, so I lived at home and studied at home and would go back every morning to New York. And then I'd come back in the afternoon. And they had a lot of trains running in those days. Now, on our trip here, I went to show them where the station was. There was no station. There was only a small freight station there. That's all. Oh, it just, everything that I did happened to me because that was what was due to happen. I was due to leave there, due to come to Texas. I did, and to New Mexico. I did all those things. It was just like it was preordained. That's how it worked out. And here we are today.
I bet it was a surprise to your family, though, that you moved to Texas.
Well, it was and it wasn't. When I told my mother that what the doctor recommended, then they immediately started to think, well, now what, I had been away from home before because I went to Ohio University. And they kind of got used to the idea that I might go away and seek my fortune in other places. And my mother suggested the business that we're in, that this family's in. She told me to go to Lee's and talk to her and see what she thought about going into that business. Because Lee had a good business. And I went over there and I folded some of the goods and looked at it, and I thought to myself, you know, this is a good business and I ought to be doing something with it. And when I came to Texas, everybody talked me out of it. They told me that you can buy fabric in any kind of, every department store sells fabric. How are you going to make it in that? You can't. So I didn't really listen to them. I went in, and it turns out we've been in business in Texas longer than anybody.
You moved to Texas, and when did Aunt Rachel move?
She came, we went in 1937. She came in about, right after we had opened the store, after I gone broke, and we were in Wink. She came about 1939, about October or November of 39, and she stayed with us for about 4 months, and then here came Herman. He came out.
Was she married to Herman?
She was married to Herman then, and Herman came out, and soon after he came out, they went back. And then Herman, he worked for RCA, and it was war work, you know, and that's what he did. Then they came out again after I had made my money. They came out again, and they came in 1949. I helped Herman to open a store in Artesia. And he did fair over there, and then I moved from Carlsbad to Austin in 1949. Actually, I moved a little bit earlier than that, and he took over my store where I had the store, and then they made a living there. Now I'm going to read off a list of rods that have to be taken. 15, number 825 at $1.99. 10, number 845 at $1.34. 6, kill that. 6 37/17s at $3.95. 212 wood pole rings at 22 cents.